nicht. Okay, alles klar. Okay, hello and good afternoon. We are going to shift gears a little bit here and move on from SheHealth to cybersecurity in the age of digital health ecosystems. So my name is Jasper Zuputlitz. I'm a partner in the investment company DIDIC. And I'm here today to facilitate the panel. And my esteemed panelists are to my immediate left here, Christian de Win, Senior Consultant Healthcare, Business Development and IT Security for hospitals of Deutsche Telekom Healthcare and Security Solutions. Welcome. Dr. Andreas Rösch from Rösch & Associates. Matteo Cagnazzo on the left-hand side, and last but not least, Professor Dr. Christian Joner. Just by way of short introduction, Christian de Win studied business informatics and has an MBA degree. You have 15 years of experience in healthcare IT and have previously worked for the Zentrum for Telematik and Telemedicine and also the Gematik, the famous Gematik in Berlin. Professor Joner, right to the immediate left of the Mr. de Win, is a physicist by training and founder and owner of the Joner Institute for Healthcare IT, an internationally renowned expert for medical software and past professor of 5 universities, including Konstanz, St. Gallen, and Stanford. His consulting focus is in the lean implementation and implementation of quality management systems, processes, and tools. Dr. Andreas Rösch is an engineer by training, electrical engineering, and has an informatics background. Also is a lecturer at the University of Marburg and has been doing this for 15 years. As CEO of Rösch & Associates, he's a specialist for the development and operation of telemedical platforms and realizes projects with strict security and compliance requirements of medical products. The smart medical platform, the telemonitoring platform Smart Medication, won the MSD Health Award in the category Solution of Care Problems through Digitalization just this year, so congratulations. And finally, Matteo Cagnazzo, on the far right here, is a PhD student at the Institute for Internet Security and at the Ruhr-Universität Bochum. His research is focusing on IT security, privacy with medical technology and medical data. He has published several scientific articles and conference proceedings and is currently founding a startup called Aware7, which focuses on user awareness and also provides technology to secure users and businesses. So I'm absolutely confident that we will have a very animated discussion today around the tough and challenging topic of cybersecurity in the age of digital health ecosystems. Let me start it off with a few observations, and I'll just move on here. I guess this was a wake-up call for all of us in the community. It's about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when Lukas Krankenhaus Neuss, which is not too far from here, was essentially paralyzed by a ransomware attack, which not only attacked that hospital, but also attacked several other hospitals at the time. And I think this made national headlines because it essentially stopgapped clinical service provision at that hospital for quite some time. And it was a very costly event for that hospital also. So another episode, which you might know from Homeland, a Netflix series, is of course totally fictional, where the vice president of the United States is killed by a remotely accessed pacemaker by terrorists. And at the time, this seemed to be totally fictional. This was in 2012, but if you think about the latest assessments and statements by the healthcare, by the IT security agency, the BSI in Germany, this scenario becomes more real now and potentially could also happen in the future. There are many different attacks and modes of attack that might hamper healthcare, and just a few examples here. In any case, healthcare is on the top 3 list of businesses and business areas that are being attacked by hackers and through the modalities that you can see here. These events can also be very costly, as you can see from this example from the US, where Anthem, a large payer in the US, settled for 16 million on a HIPAA violation that happened and actually affected almost 80 million people in the single largest healthcare data breach in US history. There's lots to be done. If you just look at this little word cloud here with login credentials that were collected from GE, you can see very familiar passwords, and that of course makes it pretty easy for hackers to actually enter these systems. With that, I would like to hand it over to Christian de Wien for a quick introduction on what Telecom is doing on this. Thanks.
Macht es der, Entschuldigung, wer macht es hier? Achso, wird zentral.
Yeah, it's coming up. You have to give him a few moments. Okay, here you are. Then you just push next or back here. Yeah?
Yeah, welcome. What's our approach at Deutsche Telekom Healthcare and Security Solutions, which I will present today. We have several approaches I will show you now. First of all, I don't want to talk too much about the current situation. We all know there are many attacks. The number of attacks is rising every day. This is just a word cloud, but what is important about this is speed. So how do you react when you are attacked? And this is essential to get the right reaction. For example, these are the numbers of a workday at the Deutsche Telekom. We have 6 million attacks on our physical hotspots every day. We have a physical hotspot network infrastructure. We have 1 billion security-related events from 3,000 data sources every day. And we have 6 billion data sets of DNS servers analyzed for cyber attacks every day. So this is just a brief... geht hier weg. This is just a short introduction what's happening every day at Deutsche Telekom, and of course we realized very early that we have to do something about it. And what's our approach about this? We built Europe's largest integrated cyber defense and security operations center. We have a master cyber defense center and a security operations center. There are 240 employees working there in different shifts, 24/7, and you have to prepare for attacks, of course, in a way like that if you are a big carrier like Deutsche Telekom, because you are attacked every day massively. So this is what we did for our own infrastructure, but we offer this also externally to our customers, and that's a special offer that we built up in the last years. More in detail, of course, defending an attack is highly collaborative. Our team consists of several layers. We have level 1 to level 3 analysts, we have content engineers, SOC managers, incident response coordinators, etc. You need a team like this to react appropriate to attacks, and as I said before, we also offer that externally, our experience. Prevention is not enough anymore. We all know these old systems, firewalls, antivirus, and so on. But you need to do more today. You need to have a detection system. It's important to realize that you are attacked. Today, antivirus and firewall is not enough anymore. When an attacker takes you as an important aim, it's quite sure that he will achieve his aim and will attack you. So it's more important to realize that you are attacked, and you need a systems for that, with different sensors that realize that you are attacked. And of course, you need an appropriate reaction to this. How do you react? It's not enough to realize that you are attacked. You have an appropriate answer for that. Our portfolio is built to these three aims: prevention, detection, and response. So we offer different services for our customers, consulting, of course. What can be done, where you're standing right now with your infrastructure, what are the appropriate systems for your clinic, for example. We offer vulnerability scanning, penetration tests, of course the classic software, so to speak, like firewall, anti-spam and antivirus and so on, but also more developed systems like threat intelligence or SIEM, which I talked about a few seconds ago. It's a system where different sensors are placed in your infrastructure and you realize pretty soon that you are attacked. And last but not least, how is the appropriate response to the attack? We offer that also, as I said before, we offer our expert also externally and consult our clients what has to be done for a special attack or about a special attack. So that's it from my side.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Devine. I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Rösch then.
Thank you, Jasper, for the introduction. Now, as you know, I'm one of the guys who's manufactured and operates a telemonitoring platform, and I want to give you a brief overview what we did and why cybersecurity is an issue even for such a small platform we operate. Our platform is named Smart Medication. It's a telemonitoring platform, as Jasper said, for orphan diseases. So we use it now in subjects like hemophilia, which is a bleeding disorder, or something you probably never heard of. It's immune thrombocytopenia, ITP. It's also a rare disease, and they are all very expensive. So the data we generate on these platforms is very expensive. The platform consists of an app, and our patients use it actually as an electronic diary instead of a paper diary. We have a web portal where the HCPs, the doctors, the university hospitals can log in and monitorize their patients and also alter therapy based on the data they look at. So we are definitely a medical device. We support non-interventional studies, CROs who retrieve the data for research. And we also are interconnected to the German registry, which is mandatory by law, at least in hemophilia. Hemophilia, to give you a short impression on that. So now my screen is dark here. I have to switch forward and back. Hemophilia is orphan, so just 4,000 patients in Germany. It's one back. 4,000 patients in Germany. That's not a lot. It's admitted for home treatment, so patients take a syringe intravenously. They learn it as small kids. The parents learn it. So it's applied at home. They don't see their doctor very regularly, sometimes 2 to 3 times a year, and they consume an awful lot of medication. So in average, one patient is worth 280,000 euros. In Germany, 1 billion per year, 2 to 3% of the entire budget. They often have comorbidities, HIV and HCV, so it's very sensitive data, and it's valuable research data, of course, because of the high price of the medication. So safety and security is very, very important for our platform. And on this side, you can see what the healthcare professional sees if he logs in to the platform. We won this prize. Thank you. You mentioned it already. Next slide. Thank you. You had the exactly the same slide. We want to have headlines in the press like this. So for that reason, we care about cybersecurity. And now I like you to keep your eyes a little bit on that slide, because to my understanding, it's very important to know the game. Who are the players in cybersecurity? What do they do and who can do what? So we are on the left side here, we are a manufacturer, and we are responsible for the vulnerabilities in our system. Likewise, Microsoft is responsible for their vulnerabilities over here, so exploits. We are also responsible for the app we introduce and bring into the market. But there are other players. You know the black hat over here, he's attacking via botnets and all what you know, spam mails, links, malware. He tries to attack our systems. And in the middle, of course, we have the user. And this is the patient and the healthcare professional. And also this guy is very important because he is fragile to social engineering, for example. He doesn't do always patches on his side. And I, as a manufacturer, can't force him to patch his systems. So it's much more than just the manufacturer. The game is much bigger than us. It's also the users, it's also our patients and healthcare professionals. Actually, this is not my chart, it's credited to the BSI, so our National Agency for Security. Next slide. We have tons of regulation and standards. Christian Jona will give us later on a deeper insight into that. I just want to emphasize on a couple of things. It's a lot of pages. Some of you know the BSI IT Grundschutz, 5,000 pages. That's a lot of paper. What we do, we emphasize actually on, for cybersecurity and IT security, on the ISO 27001 and its amendments. And I like actually the model of this ISO regulation and norm because it introduces an IT security management system. That means you are constantly improving on IT security, and you know that plan, do, check, act thing, because cybersecurity is constantly changing. You always have to challenge yourself all the way and get better and better. And this we apply, and I just want to take out one thing here. We don't distribute our app via any app store, neither Apple nor Android, because we want to be sure that our patient data, no registration data from our patient is given to anybody else out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. Matteo, please. You're up next. Matteo Caniazzo. Okay, you have here.
Okay.
Next.
Thanks. Yes, that's my first slide. Maybe, yeah, there it is. So that's my first slide, and I want to talk about the history of Aware 7 and especially of me and my co-founder. I started designing medical systems during my bachelor. I designed an EEG cap for neurofeedback at home, where I did electrode placement and then just wrote in the risk assessment, yeah, maybe someone should look at cybersecurity if we want to transmit data from home to our doctor's office. Then I thought, okay, this is an interesting topic, and I switched to internet security, designed a secure AAL system, designed a secure medical app, and then I thought, okay, how can I break medical applications? And then I did some research on pen testing and started pen testing, started bug bounty hunting, and now I'm doing both sides. And after I did all this, I thought, okay, I can solve every technical problem maybe by just designing it safe, breaking it, and then rebuilding it safe. But then doctors called me and said, okay, we have this on our computers. And I said, okay, but you do have a backup plan, right? And they all looked at me. No, there are no backups. This is all, these are all our files, all our medical files, all our patient data, and it's encrypted. And from there on, I realized, which is something that was pointed out really good on the slides before, the human component is essential. And I can't design secure software or do bug bounty hunting if people still click on shitty phishing mails. And so I need to come up with a strategy for that. And then we decided, okay, we have a few problems, and we have a few motivations for attackers, because medical data is very attractive. It doesn't really change over time, because if you are diagnosed with a heart attack this year, you will always have this unique data point, and that's why medical data is so lucrative for attackers. Also, there's high cost pressure. You can't just come up to a doctor and say, okay, you have to pay 200 euros per month per user to use our secure endpoint system. So we need something which is accessible in terms of costs. There are also few offers on the market in terms of awareness. What is there? How can we like raise awareness in medical personnel and staff? And in general, there's just low awareness, and that's where we're coming from. We say, okay, we need to provide an online awareness training for medical staff, which has to be smart, because today everything is smart. Basically, this is why this is on this slide. It has to be easy to understand, because you don't want everyone on your staff to be an expert, but they just need to react on phishing mails, which are especially bad. There will always be the one phishing mail which is so good because you're targeted by an APT or something else, which you can't detect, but you need to raise awareness in medical staff. It has to be efficient in terms of costs and in terms of time, and it has to be always updated, because strategies change over time. You can't just show the same phishing strategy for months or for years. It will basically change over time, and to be a fully accessible product, you have to be able to participate from everywhere. And this is basically what we're doing with 7med. We have the first customers now who are joining our program. And last year we raised awareness in 15,000 users. And that's basically where we're coming from. And we are trying to not to fix the technical side of security in the medical landscape, but the human side of security in the medical landscape. That was my short presentation. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Matteo. Excellent. So, last but not least, Christian Jona. Christian, please.
So, awesome. I'm here the joy killer, since I'm going to introduce some regulations, especially for the MedTech guys. So, as you already saw, there are a bunch of regulations which are concerned for the operators, but there are also for the manufacturers, a lot of them. And you see here just a very, very small subset. We talk in total about roughly 50 or more of these regulations, and in order to give you a better overview, I just compile them into one slide. So what I did first, I separated them into how binding they are. In red, this is everything which you have to fulfill. This is nothing you can discuss. The green ones are just best practices, and the orange ones are kind of in between. So you rather should do it, but it's not really hot national or international law. The next, what's happening now? Okay. The next we see is the domain where they are going to be applied. So there are a lot of regulations which are generally applicable. So I called it all industries. But here we are talking about medical devices and hospitals. And these are basically in the two pillars on the right-hand side. As we have only very limited time, we obviously have to focus on the most important ones. So the ones which are binding, and the ones, let's call it for the manufacturers. And here we have a lot of acronyms, as you see. And the first acronym you might come across is MDR. This is the upcoming medical device regulation.
currently we still are living in the domain of medical device regulations and the other European medical device directives, but they are so old, they are from the 90s, so there is nothing said about IT security. But things are changing, and now let's have a look what the medical device regulation, this guy over here, introduced meanwhile. So what you see here is one of the central sentences in the medical device regulation, and this sentence applies to software. And this sentence has been unchanged if you compare it to the medical device directive, to the medical device regulation. But they introduced 2 additional words, and these are marked here in red. And so they introduced now a state-of-the-art information security. They do not tell us what is really meant with that. They just claim you have to do state-of-the-art information security. And this is currently a little a struggle. You have a requirement, a so-called essential requirement, but you don't have very specific requirements. And typically you have a norm, a standard, which you then apply. But as of today, we are lacking such a standard. So there is no harmonized standard for IT security. As this is a major lack, we face the following problem. The notified bodies, like the TÜVs, have different auditors, and every auditor has a different approach to IT security. So I'm an auditor myself, so I observed colleagues saying, just asking the customer, do you care about IT security? Then the customer says yes, and then they click that, everything is okay. On the other side, we have auditors which say, yeah, then you have to fulfill all these requirements. So this is a huge spread. And as we are lacking this standard, we just came up with one, and TÜV Süd, TÜV Nord, and my institute will publish a for free IT guidance document next week, so to give us a certain guidance what really is expected. So before I come to the end, just 2 more, let's say, specific requirements in the MDR. The first one, if you make the software requirements, then you have to take into account also the IT security related requirements. So for example, you have to say, okay, what type of authentication needs to be implemented? You have to define that prior to developing the software. And the last one, and this gives us the link back to our hospitals, you have to describe in the so-called instruction for use, the manual, what are the expectations our hospitals have to fulfill? So what are the measures they have to take? For example, educate people, take care that there is a firewall installed, and so forth and so forth. I'm ending now with one final comment, and this final comment is about what is IT security. Since we didn't talk about this very basic concept, and we have here in all the slides the concept or the notion, this is some protection against the bad hackers, we call it the black hats. Unfortunately, this is not what our patients are put at danger mostly. If you look what's happening in our hospitals, I just show you one slide here. So this is what really happening, and everybody thinks about, this typical hacker stuff. But if you go to the hospitals, then we observe that the patients are put at danger, since suddenly there is no hard disk space left, that a switch doesn't work, and this all violates the availability of data, is thereby per definition an IT security problem. So if we talk about IT security, do not only talk about cyber security, but really talk about the availability, the confidentiality, and the integrity of data. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Christian, for this thoughts, and I think you are emphasizing a very important point. In the end, this all also contributes, of course, to quality. So it's a very broad concept here that we are pursuing. Now, all of you are having clients, are consulting with clients in one way or the other, and so I'd like to ask you, and maybe you can just start, Christian. I mean, if you work with clients, where do we stand? Where do we stand with your clients in terms of cybersecurity? What level of maturity have we reached so far? And what kind of challenges are you encompassing when you actually work with your clients. And I think that's also quite relevant for the audience because they might also relate to this quite extensively. So please.
I hope this works right now. Yeah, okay. Depends on the client, of course. I work in the clinic sector, and the clients are quite different. If you have a big clinic, for example, a university clinic, it's much different to a smaller clinic, of course. They are all aware of the problem. Everybody knows that a lot of attacks, it can be dangerous, at least as noise happened, of course. This was a big change in the sector and the industry. But it's a matter of budget, of course. Everybody wants to do something, but they are restricted by budgets. The universities, of course, have more room and more power inside their house to speak to their president or something and get more money for this. But smaller clinics want to do something, but often are restricted and can't do anything. And on the other side, maybe the IT strategy is not so far developed as in bigger clinics. Yeah.
See, well, let me just add on one question, which is, in Germany, not all hospitals are obliged to do the same thing, right? That's related to the critis and the size of the hospital also, right? Might be different in different geographies.
Yeah, that's true. You're talking about the critis regulation or the IT-Sicherheitsgesetz in German, a new law that came up, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And there's a limit, 30,000 treatments per year. This limit is quite random, I think. And smaller clinics formally don't have to care about this, but of course, in reality, they have the same problems as the bigger clinics.
Okay, so we have an arbitrary 30,000 cases per year limit. And interestingly, Lukas Krankenhaus, the one that we both showed, is actually smaller, so it's not even covered by this. So
500 beds.
Yeah, 500 beds. So so it shows you maybe how arbitrary this limit is. Christian.
So the question you just raised is, okay, what's the current status? How IT secure are the devices? And the short answer would be it's very poor. And this does not relate only to small customers or small medical device manufacturers, or the bigger ones. And one of the reasons is there was no legal obligation really. So the MDR, the requirements I just showed you, are going to become effective in 2020. So that means we had a kind of lack in the regulations for the manufacturers. Yeah, what you just were describing are the hospitals, which is a different story. So this was very, very poor, and one of the few regulatory bodies enforcing some basic IT security has been the FDA. So we frequently get back customers which are not accepted or the devices are not approved, since there is the cybersecurity not addressed adequately. And then they suddenly, there was something, but then it's actually too late. And cybersecurity is a little more than just do pen testing. It's really something you have to weave into your entire process. And this is what completely is lacking in most of the company. So the short answer to your question is very, very poor.
Okay, well, thanks. Andreas.
I totally agree. In e-health, in hospitals, it's very poor. But let us have a broader look on other industrial sectors. I worked a lot in banks. I worked in production industry, like automotive suppliers. And there it's different. So if you go into a bank, you have high security standards, well-established processes. They obey all those regulations, not the same ones. They have other ones, like the 27001 is one which is big in banks. You talk on a really high level of security. If you go to production, it's a little less. But they are starting to sense what to do. Like if I go into, say, automotive supplier, and they have some press which is still running on a Windows XP system, and they do that, and they do it for good reason. They don't want to waste a press which costs 20 million euros just because of an operating system, but they know how to protect this little environment. So they are getting better and better, but in healthcare, to be honest, it's hard. It's really hard. Hospitals have a lack of money. You said it already. Doctors have no clue about IT security, to be honest. Very few are able to discuss those topics. So depending on the industry, it's very different. That's my perspective on that.
Matteo.
Yes, I think that, of course, pen testing is not the key to answering all our questions in terms of security, but it's an integral point. And another point is awareness, because if you walk into a doctor's office, you sign a privacy statement that no data about you is disclosed. And this is a small story about my last doctor's visit. I signed my statement, and then the Sprechstundenhilfe, I don't know the term in English, sorry, the nurse, she said, the guy with the sore throat, Matteo, and she couldn't read my name, so she just shouted it all along the floor. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's my privacy right there. And that's my data integrity and confidentiality failing right in the arms of a human. And so I think we need to emphasize on teaching humans that cybersecurity and privacy in medical environments is essential, because of course our systems have to be secure, but there are possibilities to make them at least reasonable secure. Mm-hmm. But we also need to raise awareness and sensitivity in medical stuff. And it doesn't matter if it's a doctor or a nurse or someone who's a technician at a hospital. I think they all need to have higher standards.
Okay, well, I mean, several of you actually alluded to the fact that there might be a unholy alliance of lack of awareness and at the same time lack of budget, so a not so good situation for healthcare in general. And you made the nice comparison, Andreas, to banking, where that industry apparently had advanced quite a bit more. Now, I must imagine it's really difficult to operate in this market now, trying to help your clients. And so I also do remember that a few years back when I was a consultant myself, I encountered a large university hospital which had a part-time chief information security officer position. So relatively signaling a relatively low awareness when it comes to the magnitude of this problem. So Christian, I wanted to ask you, has that changed now? Are we moving into the right direction here?
I think we're moving in the right direction, but pretty slowly.
Okay.
It's again a matter of budget, of course, and the CIO in a smaller clinic is not so good represented in his house, of course.
Okay, well, I mean, we are also, since you're representing consulting to the users, so to speak, to the hospitals, we are talking about hospitals in 16 different states with, I guess, 16 different data protection laws, which also are complicating things here. But is the CEO now the chief data security officer or the chief information security officer also of these hospitals, or do we still have ways to go to actually get people to accept that this is a top CEO priority?
Of course, there's a way to go in the medium or smaller clinics.
Yeah.
They are not aware that they need this role of a CISO, of a chief information security officer. It's pretty new to them, maybe.
Yeah.
And so we have a way to go, definitely.
Okay. Well, all right. Okay. So, Christian.
I would like to make a comment to what already has been said. So here I feel a little bit the notion of more IT security is better. We have to be aware that we are not in automotive, we are not in banking, we're in healthcare. And I just would like to give an example where more security kill the patient. So we should not confuse safety and security. And so there was a hospital, and this was in the preparation of the GDPR, the Data Protection European regulation. And so the hospital really tried to make it good. So basically according to your lines. So what they did was to revoke the access rights to the nursing staff, especially when it comes to medications. Now you have to, if you know how a hospital works during night, so there is one physician who is in charge of many wards. So that means you cannot directly relate a person to certain patients. And what happened was they revoked the access rights to the nurses. The nurses weren't able to review the medication prescriptions, what they did in the past, and this was kind of a quality assurance. Since we have a lot of medication errors, we killed 9,000 people in Germany just by medication error, more than car accidents. And this quality gate was thereby diminished. So they had no chance to do that. And so there was a wrong prescription and this patient died. So if you talk about more IT security, always think about that we also have to talk about safety. And this should be our first concern in medical device industry.
Thanks.
Let me complete it from another industry sector. I worked also for television stations. And if you produce TV in the playout, you have to be online all day long. And the administrators have the same problem. They share passwords because they have to intervene if something happens, if an emergency occurs. So we have other industry sectors who solved already this problem. It's not like it's not as easy as everybody has to have a secure, different two-factor authenticated login. You have to look into the details. You have to decide in which environment, with which processes do you operate the equipment. And then you have to apply measures to get it up and running. And I think it's very important to start the thinking process exactly about this. So the answer is not always BSI IT Grundschutz page 250. So it's very individual, and you have to work that out for your special environment. And that's the hard part, to establish the processes that work for you, which minimize risk, to document the processes and to get it up and running.
Matteo, you're working on the human side of things. And I think we all agree the human side is very important when it comes to security, but also safety, of course. In your perspective, you have clients, you have people doing the awareness training and so on. What are the feedbacks you're getting? What are the responses? What are people saying?
Basically, that they didn't know about a lot of these dangers that are online, or how good phishing mails can look. Like we show a phishing mail. We don't even do campaigns yet. We haven't figured out how to do that cost effectively enough for medical clients. But we show PayPal phishing mails and show how for example, two-factor authentication can be bypassed. And they are sitting there and think, okay, that's how a good phishing mail looks, and that's how an attack looks. But I'd also like to point out that I think safety is also an important factor, and that's why it's an important research field, because it's the only research field where safety and security are so finely intervened. Interweaved. Interweaved.
Yeah.
And that if you design your system too secure, you end up with a dead patient. If in the worst case, if you design your system not secure at all, you end up with a dead patient maybe. So that's a pretty interesting field, definitely.
Continuing on to the user side, Christian. I was just wondering whether you could sort of, give us a flavor of how you actually work with hospitals, and I mean, how does this all start typically, and how do you go about really conducting a project maybe with a hospital? I think it would be interesting to know this, because there might be people in the audience who are actively considering to do this, so it might be of relevance.
Usually we start with consulting. Of course, it's not enough to show some software or something like that to establish a system. It's of course important to create a holistic view in the hospital.
Yeah.
So that means you have to include the persons, the processes, and so on. And that's what we try with our consultancy at the start. Yeah.
How do you do this in a large hospital where you might have research, for instance? So you might have a lot of unmanaged IT, unmanaged systems, and so on. How do you go about it?
It's pretty difficult, of course. You have to create the awareness, of course, and you have to include all those departments if you can.
Yeah.
Sometimes you cannot. Depends on the house and the standing of the CIO, of course. And yeah, it's difficult, still difficult.
Okay, well, it's interesting. You just said it depends on the standing of the CIO. So it seems to be a very, let's say, personalized and a personal situation then. Okay. And then, I mean, after consulting, what do you do next?
And the next step is, of course, to select appropriate systems.
Yeah.
To say system ABC is the right one for you, for your special situation. And then to make an adaptation for the special clinic, of course. And afterwards, this is not enough, of course. You have to include the people. You have to talk about the different attack vectors. I think there are many factors that are not realized by the CIO or the personnel or the staff. For example, social media databases, the internet, communication in general, and so on. And you have to talk about that. You have to make workshops to create an awareness in the clinic. That's very important for this, as I said, holistic view.
I mean, if I was a customer, I would be very concerned now because it all sounds like it's going to be really, really expensive, so and costly. And you know, can you tell us how I, as a hospital CIO, could sort of manage this situation? Creating security without compromising safety, and at the same time also somehow meeting budget.
Yeah, you can go this way step by step, of course. For example, you start with establishing a system for safe surfing in the internet, if it's allowed in this special clinic, or something to secure your emails, for example. This can be a good starting point, and you can build up your infrastructure over the next years. Of course, you cannot do everything at once. It's too costly. It's too time-consuming, and that's what we. Yeah.
And what would you answer if I asked, okay, now how long does it take me to set up a comprehensive information security management system? Because that, I believe, is in the end what you will need.
Yeah. Of course, it never ends. You start,
Forever.
and afterwards you have to do cycles. Of course, everything has a life cycle. You have to do, act, check, plan, and so on. And
Okay. So, I mean, could I reach a solid, let's say, interim state on this within 6 months or a year or so? Is that realistic?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
That could be a good starting point.
Okay, all right. Christian, you have a completely different set of clients, of course. And I also just wanted to ask a little bit, okay, how do you go about helping them in establishing device security?
Yeah, it's actually completely different. So our clients don't need to be motivated, so they are in big regulatory trouble. So typically we start reading exactly what has been the non-conformity, what did the notified body or what did the FDA complain about. So that's step number one, since this is what we have to solve. Step number two is we have to care about safety, as already mentioned. So the first thing we do is what can go wrong or what can compromise the patient's safety. And then we observe, okay, what behavior of that system would cause that risk to the patient. And then we have to take measures. It's risk management. Yeah? And then we have to take the measures in order to prevent that external misbehavior to occur. So step number one is address the non-conformity. Step number two, make a risk management and eliminate the risk or the sources of risks right away.
But would you only start to do this after there has been a problem with the regulatory process at the FDA, or would you start this essentially in the design phase of a medical device?
Absolutely. So that's the recommendation, but we have to do a lot of remediation. Yeah, so that means we come in if the problem already occurred. So obviously it's better since it's very hard to introduce IT security in a system which is already built. Yeah, since if the architecture is spoiled, there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, you can do some cosmetics, but it's not inherently safe or secure, neither nor. So sometimes they realize there's not too much to be done any longer than to change the intended use. Yeah, for example, then you have to decide, okay, it's no longer allowed to connect this thing to any external network. So, but this is obviously not what you would like to have.
Okay.
But your question is a very, very important one. IT security starts with the definition of the intended use, definition of what are the users in order to know what they have to be taught, and you have to have a clear understanding of the target network environment you would like to operate. And having this understanding, this intended use, intended purpose description, this is the basis for everything else.
Yes. Okay, thanks. I would like to hand it over to Andreas.
In our case, it's again totally different. So when we roll out our platform, say in a new university hospital, we rarely get any question about IT security, because people see it's a web platform, we are out of the business. And that's way too short, of course, we know that. So what do we do about IT security? First of all, when we designed our software, we did something like security by design. For example, our platform doesn't hold any clear text name of any patient, no address, it's totally pseudonymized, so just the doctor can translate an ID to some real person. That's a high level of security, and as you know, it's a one and only measure, a technical organizational measure in the GDPR, which is mentioned in the law, the only one. What we also do, we are progressive to show what we do in IT security. For example, we did a risk management, and we published the risk management on a medical congress. So the community for hemophilia, we are totally transparent. We have a poster. Everybody can read how we did our risk management. So we are very transparent on that. And the same for other security issues. We try to talk to people. We try to convince people. It's more we put it the other way around. We are not audited. We challenge ourselves and talk about that. That's our approach there.
And is your platform a medical device?
Yeah, it is. Up to now, class 1, but will come to be 2A, of course.
We'll come to this in a moment. Before we do, I just wanted to ask Matteo now. Matteo, you have a startup now, and I mean, are startups being taken seriously in the cybersecurity world by clients who are large and established organizations?
I think so, because the slide I showed about the ransomware, some established medicals contacted us, even though we weren't a startup yet, we were just a research institute, and they called us and said, okay, can you help us? And we did some first threat analysis or post-exploitation analysis. So it's something which you're taking seriously already as a startup, I think. Yeah. But sometimes you can motivate. In another way. We had one client who had an totally insecure system, and also his web page was still running with HTTP, and he had a contact form, and he had a appointment booking form, and stuff like that. All kinds of patient data went into that, and we said, okay. You have to. We can't motivate you in terms of security, but maybe you can think about search engine optimization, because the Google algorithm ranks sites higher and better if you do HTTPS. And we did a proof of concept, cloned his site with an HTTPS certificate, and after 2 weeks, our fake site ranked higher than his real doctor's site, and that's lastly how we motivated him to deploy HTTPS on his website, and lastly in his whole infrastructure.
Wow, okay, so since you work on the human side, you're also operating with the full spectrum of human influencing techniques, so that's pretty interesting. Now, before we do the next round, I just wanted to quickly build on medical device regulation. You alluded to the fact that your platform might be recertified, and I guess we're looking at this, and it's a little bit of a side topic, but I wanted to mention it here, Christian. As far as I can tell, MDR is going to lead to massive recertification or reclassification, I should say, of medical devices. Can you just comment on that a little bit?
Yes, as already mentioned, I'm the guy with the sad news today, and one of the sad news is the so-called Rule 11. And the Rule 11 in the medical device regulation tells in what class a standalone software falls. And they changed that entirely in comparison to the old MDD, the Medical Device Directive. And this Rule 11 says the following. all software which serves therapeutic or diagnostic purposes are at least class 2A. So far, no notified body could tell me any software which still falls in the class 1, in the uncritical class like your device currently. So that means suddenly all software is classified much higher, and the bad news is this means you have to involve a notified body, you have to involve typically a quality management system, and this raises the cost dramatically. So what we are doing in Europe, that's really horrible. Whereas the FDA and the US government, they released the so-called 21st Century Cures Act, and the idea was to promote digital health. What are we doing? We do exactly the opposite. FDA deregulates, Europe regulates. And this obviously is killing really the innovation, it's killing the startups, and this is something very, very bad what we are doing here. And what I'm really completely angry about is that the European Commission, which demand from every single medical device manufacturers to make a risk management, they didn't do that. They did not calculate how many patients will be killed since we do not have the devices. So I'm now a little over 50, so that means I'm facing death pretty soon. But I would like to have the systems helping me to treat cancer correctly. I would like to have the software which helps me to find the right medication. And exactly this type of systems of medical devices are now killed. And this is really bad for our society, and it's also bad for our healthcare system.
Andreas, do you want to comment? Because you're going to reclassify, I guess.
Well, we are kind of sitting between the chairs.
Yeah.
And I agree to what Christian just said. And actually, it's not a good idea to put all the class 1 into 2A. That doesn't make really sense. So you should differentiate. On the other hand, we have the laws. We have to do something about that. We have a pretty nice grace period, which gives us some time. In our case, we plan to do kind of a showcase together with one named body in this country. We already decided to do it for our platform. But what I would like to say, let's wait and see a little bit along the road. Yeah?
Please.
What will happen?
Correct reply.
That's basically, I have to agree and to disagree in a certain manner. So first we have this grace period. However, the grace period only can start if there are notified bodies accredited for the MDR. And there is currently, do you know the number of notified bodies which are accredited for MDR? 0. So there aren't any. So I'm an auditor, I'm working for a notified body myself, and we know that we will be unable to handle all these requests. It's absolutely clear. So you cannot approve your system since there is not enough notified bodies left. So this is comment number 1. Comment number 2, so it's not a contradiction, but it's an additional thought. And I would like to add another thought. If we write law and then we say, and this is actually what the BfArM, the German Institute for Medications and Pharmaceuticals, what they said. I talked to the boss even. He said something very along your lines. Es wird schon nicht so heiß gegessen, wie es gekocht wird. So I'm really wondering, why do we need laws? Yeah, think about traffic laws. Yeah, it won't be eaten as hot as it was cooked. So then we don't need laws. And we have that, let's say, this absurd situation, even twice with that Rule 11. The first, possibly we can stay in class 1, which is ridiculous. The regulation is pretty clear. And then there are other parts of that regulation which say if something bad can happen, a patient dies, you even are in class 3. And this makes things even worse. And now they install basically a working group in the European Commission basically to find explanations why the law was not meant the way it was written. So then I'm really wondering, why don't we fix the law?
Okay, if I understand you correctly, it's a kind of a perfect storm. But Andreas,
that would
please.
be the best, actually. But up to now, what can we do? Watch and wait. Yeah.
Well, I guess Christian is advocating to be agile when it comes to getting ready or at least preparing, and that of course can be a challenge in itself. Matteo, you had your comment.
Yes, I'm not a regulator guy. Maybe you noticed it.
Yes.
But I had a student working on exactly this topic because we have a research project which has a post-research go-to-market strategy, and we want to know how we can prepare it to be able to satisfy everything that is required under GP under MDR, and it's pretty hard. And we also asked BfArM and who else is there, and no one could give us any kind of explanation or like guideline how we should implement our stuff. And so it's also for research projects, if they have a go-to-market strategy afterwards, it is also not the best situation right now.
Yeah, I see it. I just wonder, I mean, we have been talking about challenges and problems a lot now. At the same time, our industry must go on. Healthcare must be provided. We have to continue operating in this very challenging regulatory and also very insecure and sometimes unsafe environment. So I'd like to ask you a little bit, and maybe start with Christian. I mean, we know we are not in a perfect world here when it comes to cybersecurity, and also the related solutions or potential solutions. What would make your work easier? What would make our world a little bit more secure when it comes to cybersecurity? Maybe what are your ideas around the development of regulation and potentially also rules, of course?
Yeah, different questions in one.
Sure.
The systems are pretty well developed, I think. When you take a look at the industry, we as Deutsche Telekom Healthcare and Security Solution at Telekom have a lot of partners, of course. We don't program every security program ourselves because we have a good grasp what's happening in the market, I think. So I think the systems are pretty well developed. So the question is, how are they applied? That's the main question. So the implementation is very important, of course. And again, the awareness. The awareness that I have to do something, and when I do something, it's of course not enough to implement the software, to install it, but I have to know how to deal with it, how to react when an attack appears, and that's very important. So I think the question is not so much technically, but more, I think it's the mindset that's very, very important, and that's still in development, and that's...
What do you do to change mindsets in your client base?
Yeah, as I said, we talk a lot about this. We talk about the systems, of course, but also about this holistic view, the view on everything, the processes, the people that are working in the clinic, that everybody is important when it comes to IT security, and hope to achieve something with it. But
will it be helpful to expand the CRITIS regulation to all hospitals? What about outpatients? What about MVZ? What about all these providers? We have a much more complex provider landscape even in Germany.
It's a difficult question. Of course, the law is a good first step, but it cannot be the only step.
Yes.
The next step is a decree, which we already have with the 30,000 treatments. But you need a more detailed definition. There's no technical definition, of course. Usually it's not put in the law, the technical definition. You put in a decree or another decree, or in regulation maybe a little bit. But when you have a law, the question is how can you control that the law is applied? And when you control it and you find somebody that's not acting according to the law, what will happen then? If nothing happens, and of course nobody will take care of the law. This question has many dimensions, and I think it's difficult to come to an answer or to recommend something special here.
Okay, thanks. Christian, what's on your wish list, so to speak?
I don't wish, I act.
Very good.
So what I'm doing is basically we offer a complimentary help, especially for the smaller startups, since they are just overwhelmed. I had a IT security conference, getting a little according to Matteo's lines, increasing the awareness, but not of the users, but of the manufacturers, publishing an IT security guideline for free. So we shouldn't always complain. We should act, and this is also what drives me. So there are certain things which are kind of out of control, what I can do, for example, Rule 11. So what I can do is to lobby, and that's what I'm doing right now, to rethink that particular law, and this is what we can do.
But I mean, if a lawmaker asked you, let's say in Germany or on the EU level, okay, Professor Joner, you're an expert, how would you advise us to change laws and regulations?
Absolutely. What I would recommend is to change the classification from severity of harm to risk. That means we have to take into account not only the severity but also the probability of a harm. Since otherwise the rule doesn't make any sense. We would like to reduce risk, not just severities.
Okay. Andreas?
Okay, I think from a broader perspective, we are in a kind of a dog race between those people who like to attack something and steal some data and make money out of it, and those who like to protect it. And this dog race is going on and on for, I would say, many, many years. And I like to compare to something we have in history already as an example. It's encryption and decryption. And you may know the book of Simon Singh, Secret Messages, and you can, for thousands of years, look on how people encrypt something to keep it secret, and other people decrypt the same thing to get the information. And this race is very much the same we see today, and it will go on, and I think we have to constantly work on that, and there's no simple solution. There's not a law which will have an absolute or a measure on having absolute security. It's not possible. So let's go and work on that forever.
Matteo?
I'd like to add that maybe we should all think about the chances that digitalization in healthcare is enabling, and we need to know the risks, and according to the risks, we need to act. We can't just say, this is a potential threat, but we need to assess the risk and then act accordingly. We can't just say, okay, we need to fix this. And then our insulin pump doesn't work anymore from remote, but we need to assess the risk, know the risk, and our users need to know the risk and act accordingly and not careless in the digital world. I think that's basically a form of positivity that we need to get into the discussion, that there is hope.
Okay, well, switching to somewhat more positive statements here, which is good. Now, for the audience who is still here, you all must be really, really interested in this topic because you're here, so thanks very much. I'd like to open the discussion a little bit for questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we can equip you with a microphone so we could also proactively and positively include you into this discussion. Are there any questions? Please. Can you identify yourself also?
Yes, I am Miklos Györfi from the European Parliament. I would like to put a question because you said a lot of things about MDR, but nothing about the cybersecurity package which has been recently launched, which contains one important issue, certification. Could I hear something about that? Certification of devices in cyberspace. Or you don't know about that?
We'll check. I will check. Does anybody feel like in a position to comment on that? No? Sorry, I think we have to take this offline then. So we'll do it, but I guess we'll have an offline discussion on that. Any other questions? Comments? Yes, please. Okay.
Hi, I'm Andrew Benton. I'm from a small medical device manufacturer in the UK. Question, slightly technical, apologies. It's really about the contradiction, almost, the need for validation on a medical device, and then the need for the constant updates for security, and how, like, the best practice for that, and how you see that evolving in the future. Do you see any changes really coming to that validation approach to allow that to be quicker?
So if you look to the US, we get a slight idea where we're heading to. So the FDA just recently recognized a standard which is UL 2900, and this standard requires, so it's not law, it's a recognized standard, and this standard requires a 2 weeks period between detection of a vulnerability and the patch, and they even talk that you have to be able to make the rollback of the patch. So if your question is, where are you heading to in that aspect, I think we're heading to a continuous DevOps, you probably would call it, where we have a continuous inflow of data. Just to give a number, the NIST, the National Institute of Standardization Technology, publishes 5,000 roughly vulnerabilities a month. So that means we have not a lack of data, we just have too much data to get analyzed. So what we have to come to is basically a semi-automated assessment of this information, development processes, maintenance processes which are able to develop a patch pretty fast, have a high degree of automation, since otherwise your verification validation activities wouldn't be finished within a 2 weeks period of time. So high degree of automation, and then also the process have to be prolonged to the customer side. And here the UDI, the unique device identifier, might be of help, since now we know where the devices are, since this is a precondition for fixing them. So it will have a major impact of designing processes, and it requires that the hospitals and the manufacturers work more closely together, a little bit in the sense of the 8001-1 standard. So this will be the changes, it will be the speed and the automation of applying and rolling out patches.
Thank you, Christian. Any other questions or comments? Doesn't seem to be the case, so please see us after this discussion if you have any additional questions that come to mind here. So I'd like to sort of end it with a little outlook into the future. And obviously, we already know that whatever time horizon you take, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, there's going to be a continuous task to essentially stay on top of all the challenges that are posed by cybersecurity threats and to the security and also to the safety of patients. But beyond that, I would just like you to speculate a little bit where we're heading with cybersecurity. So I'm thinking it might be interesting for the audience to learn a little bit how you feel about a 3 to 5 year horizon when it comes to cybersecurity. Where are we going to be? What kind of developments are going to become relevant, and how are we going to tackle the situation?
Yeah, as you said before, this race between good and bad defenders against attackers will go on forever, I think. It will be a constant race, a constant development of tools and software, of course. What we'll see in the near future, I think, is more usage of artificial intelligence. That will be very important. So the defenders have to use artificial intelligence, of course, too. So the solution will be self-learning systems. And I think that will be the main development of the next years that we will see. Yeah.
Okay. Christian?
Yeah, parts of the outlook I already gave. It will be automation of what you said, detection, prevention. I'm expecting that we will really increase in medical devices the abilities to address these issues pretty fast within the next 2-3 years. So I'm very optimistic with respect to that. But as you both already were pointing out, it's a race which never can be won. And that just means we have to put our best efforts, do whatever is reasonable, and also do the risk management in terms of sometimes it's better not to connect devices. So for example, we have now scalpels or knives they start to connect. So I'm always wondering, do we actually need that, or what's the benefit for the patients? And I think this consideration should be done before developing something which might be potentially unsecure.
Andreas?
Actually, cybersecurity issues do not disturb me so much today. I'm much more concerned about how we deal with data, how we deliver data to some companies who shouldn't have that data, how insensitive users are for their own data, this is, from my perspective, today the biggest issue we have to face. It's bigger than cybersecurity. So if you do your homework and do some measures, and you can handle it somehow. But data leakage it's something really much more difficult to cope with.
And that's where you think we will find, hopefully find solutions to actually tackle this topic.
Yeah, well, we have this beautiful new GDPR since May 25th.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay, let's see. Matteo, a lot of your professional life is in front of you, so I think you're best positioned to speculate about the future because it's yours, so please.
Yeah, on the technology side, I hope that we can provide a secure and reliable update process, especially for IMDs. And I hope we will be able to deliver this in the next 5 years, because I'm feeling weird if I read a statement by a big medical company and they say, yeah, there might be a little chance if we update your cardiac IMD that there is a critical failure. I don't want to read that on the technical side, and on the human side, I hope that we raise awareness and that medical staff knows there are people out there out for medical data, and they will target especially medical facilities to exfiltrate medical data.
Thank you very much. Well, we are almost ending. I just have one final question, which is, I'm obviously not a physicist and not an informatics expert, but I read something about quantum computing and how quantum computing might essentially challenge all the established paradigms that we currently are following when it comes to cybersecurity, IT security. So how real is all of this? Are we going to see this in the future? And what are we going to be doing about it?
Yeah, of course, we will see quantum computing in the future, not in the near future, but a little far away. Of course, this will be a threat, but only if we stay at the current length of encryptment keys. You have to take other keys, longer keys, of course, other encryptment algorithms, of course, and if